Exciting stuff. Another Unearthed Arcana drop this morning, and I'm going to cover the Arcane Archer first. First of all, here is the intro flavor text you have. It's pretty similar to the 2014 version, and you've got the design notes, which are interesting. So, Curving Shot has been revised to use the same ammunition, but a new attack roll. Magic Ammunition is a new feature that grants magical effects to your ammunition that can be used outside of combat. Ever Ready Shot is now available at a later level, but always regains one expended Arcane Shot die. Arcane Burst is a new feature that grants an additional effect to the Indomitable. And Masterful Shots has been redesigned and now allows you to reposition and attack. All right, we're going to compare the 2014 Player's Handbook version of each feature to the June Unearthed Arcana to the September Unearthed Arcana that just came out today. So the first feature up is Arcane Archer Lore, and there was only one tiny change that's material. You'll see throughout these there's some wording changes on some things. Flavor text is a little bit different on a few things, and wording on how they explain different features is a little bit different. I'm only going to call out like the material mechanical differences. And in this case, it's just that one word or changed to and. So you get both the Arcana and the Nature Skill. That's cool. Love it. The Arcane Shot feature is virtually the same between the June Unearthed Arcana and the September Unearthed Arcana. So I'm not going to read through that. But here it is with the Player's Handbook version. And the wording is quite different, but functionally it's very similar on how it functions. Here's the differences, though. The big differences are that with the both Unearthed Arcana versions, you get this Arcane Shot die part of the feature, and that allows for much smoother scaling. Whereas with the 2014 version, there was no Arcane Shot die. It didn't scale up smoothly, and there was just all of the Arcane Shots did the same damage as they always did when you got them until level 18, and then there was a big increase. So the Arcane Shot die is, I consider, a good improvement over the 2014 versions because you get that smoother scaling where you're going to get a damage increase at level 10, level 15, and then again at level 18. And in almost every case, the damage in the Unearthed Arcana version scales up to be the same as what you would have gotten in the 2014 version. You just get damage increases along the way. The next call out is that between the June Unearthed Arcana and the September Unearthed Arcana, there's a small change here too. The September one has this section that says at higher levels, and it explains that at higher levels and what those levels are when your Arcane Shot die increases. And that is an addition to this particular section of the feature, but it's actually functionally identical to the June version of the Unearthed Arcana because they just had it spread out in the text. And that was your level 10 feature, your level 15 feature, and your level 18 feature. But functionally completely the same between the two Unearthed Arcana. Then we have Curving Shot. So one little change from the Player's Handbook 2014 version of Curving Shot, where it had this call out that you needed a magic arrow. That was a little bit confusing, and it relied on this other feature that the 2014 Player's Handbook had called Magic Arrow, and you'll see that a little bit later here in this video. And so that's no longer referenced in the Unearthed Arcana versions, and some of the text between the June UA and the September UA has changed a bit. They are largely the same functionally. There might be some small differences in how those two, on the restrictions of the ricochet attack or the second attack using your bonus action when it misses. Some nuances to how that might trigger and some nuances to the differences in restrictions. You see the June version did not have a restriction on the 60 feet, being within 60 feet of the original target, even though the 2014 Player's Handbook did. So they brought that back. And you see that they removed the total cover reference in the June UA versus the September UA. So that's gone. I'm not sure that would have been weird anyway. Really, the way this should work is perhaps there should not be total cover between your original target and the one you're going to ricochet to. Although I think that's going to be perhaps an unnecessary level of specificity. It's one of those situations that DM is just going to have to sort out and see what makes sense. But overall, works roughly the same in all three versions. Now we have Ever Ready Shot. In the Player's Handbook 2014 version, this was at 15th level. And the way it worked was if you rolled initiative and had no uses of Arcane Shot remaining, you regained one. And myself, and I know other people in the community really didn't like that. It's not great that you have to consume all of your uses, and you only benefit from this if you have none left, right? That means you're kind of incentivizing you to blow all your uses early on so that you start getting some back. But then what that means is even though you're starting to get some back, you only ever have one with that Ever Ready Shot because it only ever gives you one and only when you have none left. And the June UA had it function exactly the same, but moved it up to level 7. So it was nice that you got that a little earlier. Still not great. And now in the September UA, they changed it so that you don't have to have 0 shots remaining. Just whenever you roll initiative, you regain one, and moved it back to level 10. So that's the best version out of all three of these, and probably great. Like I think that's probably pretty good. I think it's going to leave the scenario where the DM is going to have to adjudicate bag of rats scenarios as players try to say, well, I'm going to attack this bag of rats. That means I rolled initiative and I'm going to get one back. And then I'm going to attack the next rat and get another one back. Now the DM is explicitly in control of when initiative is called for. So yeah, DMs out there, don't let the players bully you into that. You decide when initiative is rolled. So you decide when this happens, and you're just going to be on your shoulders to make sure that bag of rats exploits aren't leveraged. All right, and here's the magic arrow that I talked about earlier from the 2014 version in the Player's Handbook. It was strange. It just said that your arrows, the ammunition you use, or specifically arrows, because this only worked with bows. This whole subclass only worked with bows in that version. Become magic. It didn't give them any bonuses, and the fact that it was always a magic arrow meant that it always worked with your curving shot. Kind of, confusing in a few situations. It did help you overcome the resistance to and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage, but that mechanic is largely gone. They've removed that of the design for 2024, and all new monsters no longer even have that. So it's now unnecessary unless you're playing with a older version of monster stat block or an older monster stat block that hasn't been reprinted yet. And they didn't put it into the June UA. They didn't put Magic Arrow into the June UA at all. And so here we have in the September UA, they brought it back, which is interesting, and they completely redesigned it. So now it takes a whole magic action. So this is basically like casting a spell, but no spell components. And it allows you to create some spell-like effects. You get to choose one of 3 spell-like effects, and you get to do this magic, and they call it magic ammunition, so a slight change to the name. I guess that's just to make this more agnostic for whether you're using a sling, a bow, or a crossbow, which is great. But the 3 options you have are basically kind of these, a watered-down version of the darkness spell, which is a second-level spell. Roughly the full version of the knock spell, which is a second-level spell, and then like part of the rope trick spell, which is also a second-level spell. So you kind of get these 3 kind of partially watered down in 2 of the cases, or largely watered down in 2 of the cases, versions of second-level spells, and they take your whole action. So the description says that you can use these out of combat. You actually can use these in combat, but it takes your whole action. And at level 7, you've got 2 attacks. So if you do this as your action, you're getting no attacks, and you're just shooting this arrow instead. And that actually, the cost to do this goes up. At level 11, when you, as a fighter, would get 3 attacks, and at level 20, when you would get 4 attacks. So Yeah, interesting options. I like seeing them adding some versatility to this class, this subclass, so that they can do more interesting things, mostly outside of combat. And this recharges on a short or long rest. So that's cool. Not bad. I think it would have been, frankly, easier if they had just, instead of creating this a new set of rules that you have to kind of parse out and figure out how does this work and how is it different than what you already are familiar with. It would have been easier if they just said you shoot the arrow and it casts darkness at the spot where it lands, or you cast the knock spell with whatever object you shoot with the arrow, or just cast rope trick. Frankly, I think if it just said that, that's not going to give them a great deal more power. In the case of rope trick, a little bit more. Otherwise, virtually works the same and would be a lot less overhead for players and DMs to figure out and remember how these things work and how they're different than those spells. Then we have Arcane Burst. This is new in the September UA that came out today. You can push creatures away from you with your Arcane Mastery. When you use Indomitable, each creature of your choice in a 10-foot emanation originating from you must succeed on a strength saving throw against your Arcane Shot DC or be pushed up to 20 feet straight away from you. So this is, at first, seemed a really cool and interesting idea, but as I thought about it more, the fact that it's tied to Indomitable kind of ruins this. And here's what I mean. So I've put up on the screen alongside this that in the 2024 Player's Handbook version of the base fighter class, so every fighter already has this, you've got Tactical Shift. That whenever you activate your second wind with a bonus action, you can move up to half your speed without provoking an opportunity attack. And if you're activating your second wind with a bonus action, you're also healing. So really, whenever you do tactical shift, you get healing, 1d10 plus your fighter level, and you get to move up to half your speed without provoking an opportunity attack. And that's important because let's say and the reason Arcane Burst you'd want to benefit from Arcane Burst is you're kind of cut in melee. You're an arcane archer. You do not want to be in melee. You want to get back to range, right? So somehow you've gotten surrounded or you're stuck in melee for some reason, and you want to get away. Well, Indomitable is only going to activate when you fail a saving throw, right? So you've got to be stuck in melee and fail a saving throw before this will even do anything. But what's most likely to happen is if you get stuck in melee, if your turn comes up before you're forced to make a saving throw, well, you're going to do tactical shift to get away. And so the chances that Arcane Burst are even going to activate, right? Like, what are the chances that you're stuck in melee and then before it's your turn, somebody forces you to make a saving throw and then you fail the saving throw? Like, all that has to happen before Arcane Burst is going to trigger. It'll definitely, it's not going to be useless. It's just going to be very, very circumstantial. It's only going to be in those scenarios where either you're out of second wind uses and you're just stuck in melee until somebody finally forces you to fail a saving throw, or let's say you're grappled, right? So you can't move away with your tactical shift because you're grappled and that makes your movement 0. And then they force you to make a saving throw and you fail it, and then Indomitable is going to trigger, and now you've got Arcane Burst. In the 2014 monster version design, this probably would have been more beneficial because there was a lot of effects where the monster hits you and then you make a saving throw. So if you got hit and then made the saving throw and failed it, and in those kind of cases, whenever you were hit and make a saving throw, these are the scenarios you'd want to use. That is when the extra rider was some kind of grapple, some kind of restrain, some kind of lock you down. So you actually have a much higher chance of triggering Indomitable in those scenarios. In the 2024 monster design, they've gotten rid of that, I think almost entirely. So it's either an attack roll or a saving throw. So if it's going to be a hit that grapples, well, if they hit you, they automatically grapple you also. There's no additional saving throw that might trigger your Indomitable. Some of the monster stat blocks have, instead of an attack, they can do this other ability, and that other ability only has a saving throw. So that might still trigger your Indomitable, but again, that's only going to matter if you're still there, right? If your turn comes before the monsters, you would want to use tactical shift to guarantee that you get away first, and then and you're going to make all of your ranged attacks, right? Like you're going to back up and make all of your ranged attacks. So I think this is a cool idea. I don't think it's going to be very useful. I think it's going to be pretty niche when it triggers. Like I don't even think it's going to trigger very often. I think a lot of the times it's going to trigger is when you're already at range, you're standing way far back, and you failed some sort of dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma saving throw, or maybe even a constitution saving throw. The strength saving throws tend to be triggered by melee, by some sort of melee range. So you're going to be at range, you fail one of those other saving throws, and then you use Indomitable to succeed instead, and then this is going to trigger and mean nothing because you're so far back, there's nobody around you anyway. I predict that's what's going to happen most of the time. And so this will largely be a waste, a non-feature. Anyway, hopefully they can like work on, cooking this a little bit more, make it something interesting and useful. But I like the idea of something new. And then another new one for the September UA that came out today is Masterful Shots. Now, the June UA had a feature at level 18 called Masterful Shots, but that was just your scaling of your arcane shot die to D12, and that's all it did. So they already rolled that all the way into the base arcane shot feature, and now you have an entirely new feature. So this is, even though there's the same name, this is an entirely new feature. So you employ agility in your sharpshooting. When a creature you can see misses you with an attack roll, you can take a reaction to move up to half your speed away from the attacker without provoking opportunity attacks. You can then make a ranged attack roll against the attacker as part of this reaction if the attacker is within the weapon's range. And I have wanted a reaction ranged attack for so long, and this is perfect. I love this. No suggestions for improving it. This is excellent. Love it. You get a reaction, you get a move away. So somebody runs up to you, even though you're trying to be at range, they hit you or they attack you, they miss. Boom, you get to use your reaction to move half your speed without provoking an opportunity attack. And then once you get back to range, you get to shoot them too. This is awesome. What a great capstone for the Arcane Archer. This is the best thing they've done with the whole redesign. Well, the Arcane shot die and this are the two best things they've added to this subclass redesign. I love these. All right, let's talk about the arcane shot options themselves. So Banishing Arrow first. We got the 2014 version, and then I combined the UA for June and September because they're virtually identical. There was a little bit of change in the flavor text, but that's not worth taking the screen real estate for that. So the big change to this one, and it works virtually the same, the big change is that addition of the arcane shot die. Whereas the Banishing Arrow in 2014 did no damage when you first got it and then scaled to 2d6 at level 18, it now is going to start at 1d6 when you, depending on what level you get it at. It's going to be one roll of your arcane shot die, and that's going to scale up to 1d12 at level 18. So it's going to start off with more damage and then scale to be roughly the same at level 18. So that's cool. This was always a great option and one of the better ones, and I guess it's nice that it does just a little bit more damage early on than it used to. Now, Beguiling Arrow. This one's interesting. The change, again, the two UA versions, virtually the same except for a little bit of flavor text. And then there's a change here, which is in the 2014 version, you couldn't choose yourself as the charmer. Now you can choose yourself as the charmer. And I think this one isn't, most in the community don't seem to think it's very good. I like this one. First of all, hilarious that you get to play Cupid, right? You're going to shoot somebody and you make somebody else the charmer of the person you shot. So you make them fall in love with somebody else. That's hilarious. But even more than the hilarity, this is an interesting way to protect an ally. It's kind of like a sanctuary. You have an ally in trouble. This allows you to shoot whoever the biggest threat to that ally in trouble is, and then now they're charmed by that ally. And that means until the start of your next turn, that target, assuming they fail the saving throw, cannot do anything harmful towards your ally, including AoE attacks, right? Because here's what the charmed condition does. You can't harm the charmer. You can't attack the charmer or target the charmer with damaging abilities or magical effects. And that target means specifically you can't force them to make a saving throw. So even if you're going to drop a fireball and you say, well, I'm not dropping it on them, I'm putting it on the guy next to him, you can't put them, the person that has charmed you cannot include them in the area of effect of any of your area effect damaging or negative abilities. So you have an ally in trouble and you're worried about the red dragon breathing fire on them, you can use this to force the red dragon and they can no longer breathe fire on them. In fact, one cool little trick is you put that person that you make the charmer with this, put them in the center of all of your allies kind of bunched up around them, and now that red dragon cannot include the charmer in the area of their fire breath. So they'll be forced to try to angle it to only get a few of you. Now maybe it's just better if you can split up, scatter far enough that they can't get more than one of you in with their in the area of their breath weapon anyway. But let's say there's not enough space to spread out. Do this, and now they're forced to angle it so that the charmer is not included, which means they cannot get all of you. They might be able to angle it and get part of the party, but they cannot get all of the party. So I actually like this one a lot. Great way to save an ally in trouble. And the scaling on damage is roughly the same. Starts off at 2d6. In the 2014 Player's Handbook version, it ends at 46. The UA versions are going to end at 2d12, so very close to the same damage. And I think this one's great. Bursting Arrow. In the UA, both UA versions, again, they're identical. Or a little bit, I think a little bit change in the flavor text. The 2014 version, the text is different, but the way this functions is basically identical, and the scaling is basically identical too. So, and this was always a decent option. So that's great. No saving throw, just auto damage in an area. It's not a lot of damage, but if you have some minions bunched up and you just want to clear them out, this is a great way to do it. Enfeebling Arrow. So there were some changes here in the rider effect. The damage, much like a lot of the other ones, is virtually the same. Starts off at 2d6, scales up to 2d12, which is very close to 46. So the damage scaling roughly is very, very close. Same damage type necrotic, but the rider effect here is far better. So the rider effect in the 2014 version was a strange kind of similar to Rave Enfeeblement kind of effect, where your damage dealt by weapons is halved. Now they're poisoned, so they're going to have disadvantage on all attack rolls and ability checks, all of them. And if the poisoned target hits anybody with an attack roll, they just roll one of your arcane shot die and reduce that from the damage. So no awkward math of trying to have the damage and trying to figure out weapon attack versus other kinds of attacks, right? Is it a claw? If it's a claw or a rend or something like that, then that's not considered a weapon attack. So this wouldn't apply to that. So the UA version applies to all kinds of attack rolls. So great, it's going to affect anything: ranged, weapon, quote, natural attacks or unarmed strikes. This is going to apply to all of those. And it deducts your arcane shot die from the total of the damage. So in some cases, this might reduce more damage than half, right? If the damage was going to be 8 and you roll a 12 because you're 18th level on your arcane shot die, you reduce the damage to 0. So this is far better. Big improvement. Love it. Grasping Arrow. All right, sorry about this. This one's a little complicated. This one did have a change between the June version and the September version, so I had to put both of them on there. So the screen's kind of cluttered, and hopefully the arrows help you follow through as I talk from the 2014 version to the June version to the September version on the changes. So first up, in the 2014 Player's Handbook version, it did 2d6 poison damage on that initial hit. In the UA versions, the damage is the same between the two of them, and it's one roll of your arcane shot die. So it's actually less damage now, but it's slashing, which is better than poison. Poison is the most immune. There are the most monsters out there in frankly, all versions. 2014, 2024 there are the most monsters immune to poison damage out of any other type of damage. So slashing is an improvement on that damage. The rider effect is, let's say the control part of the rider effect is better, because the 2014 version, all it did was reduce your speed by 10, and if you moved, you got punished for moving with this additional damage. So they've taken away that additional damage punish, which is actually a big reduction in damage. Because if the monster moved around, they could be taking 2d6 extra slashing damage every turn, no save, no hit, no attack roll, no nothing. They were just taking more and more damage. And if they didn't have a ranged attack, they had to move to try to reach you, right? So they've taken that away, the extra slashing damage from moving, but they've improved the control effect, which is instead of just a 10 feet speed reduction, now it's the full restrained condition, which reduces your speed to 0 and gives you disadvantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and gives all of your allies, gives you and your allies advantage to attack the restrained target. That's a huge improvement and probably worth way more than that slashing damage from moving. I would say the overall damage impact here is going to be much greater from the restrained condition, just because you and your allies are delivering more damage than that 2d6 once per round. And then then there was one change that I almost missed between the June UA and the September UA, which is it went from being restrained until the start of your next turn to restrained for 1 minute, which is a huge duration increase. And they do not get a resave at the end of their turn. So the only way they can get out of that restrained is they've got to use their action to make a strength athletics check to escape it. So that is even more powerful than the June version. And restrained is a great condition to impose on your enemies. So that is powerful. And they did add the one caveat, which I agree with, which is if you're going to have a 1 minute duration on this, and have no automatic resaves, then yeah, you should restrict it to you can only have one monster or one creature restrained by this at a time. If you use it again on somebody else, then the first one is freed. I agree with that. This would have been just ridiculously overpowered if they hadn't put that in, because otherwise the Arcane Archer could just be locking down every single enemy and all of them are restrained for 1 minute and get no resaves. Now they can use their actions, but at the very least, you've now drained away or removed the enemy's action, at least one enemy action, which is great. That's like roughly the same effect as the command spell. So that's, I think, overall a big improvement, and this one is great. All right, piercing arrow, virtually the same. Now the two UA versions are roughly identical, just a little bit change in the actually I think the flavor text is identical between these two. But between the 2014 and the UA versions, the damage is increased. So instead of 1d6 scaling to 2d6, it's now 2 rolls of your arcane shot die. So that's going to be 2d6 to start with, scaling all the way up to 2d12 by 18th level. So this is a net increase to double of the arcane shots damage specifically. So it doesn't double the damage you're getting from your arrow, the base ammunition, whatever that is. But the arcane shot itself's damage is doubled. And then there's one additional change they put in here, is that red box above that says the ammunition phases through solid objects, which is actually a pretty interesting change that they added. That means you could shoot somebody through a wall. And that's pretty cool. I think that's a good addition to this. I always thought that this was kind of a weak option, and I still think it's actually a little bit weak. If they made it like, instead of a 30-foot line, made it equal to the range of your weapon and allowed you to choose targets, I think this would be a really solid shot. As it is, I think it's still on the weak side, even with these changes. Seeking arrow. So this is another interesting one. Both the piercing arrow and the seeking arrow do not trigger when you hit with an attack with your weapon, your ammunition weapon. And I actually wish that they would redesign these so that they do work when you hit with an attack, so that all the arrows work the same. Because what you have is these two specific shots contradict the general rule under your arcane shot feature that says when you hit with an attack with a weapon that uses ammunition, then you can trigger this. And then you have this exception on these two that says, but in these two cases, you actually don't make an attack roll at all. You need to remember to declare this first, and then they have to make saving throws. And I foresee, and I haven't seen Arcane Archer used a lot because in 2014 was not considered a very good subclass. But whenever I saw it used, there was a lot of oh, you roll the attack roll first, and then you're like, oh wait, I meant to use Seeking Arrow, and I forgot that one doesn't use an attack roll. So it bogs the game down. I think it causes player overhead. There's an overhead and complexity that's unnecessary here. I think that there are ways they could redesign both of these so they conform with the rest of the arrows, the rest of the arcane shots. Okay, but that's enough on that. The big change here is really just how the damage works, and actually, it's just the arcane shot die. You start off with 2 of them, so it's going to start at 2d6 and scale up to 2d12 by level 18. So again, this one doubled in damage. The shots damage was doubled over the 2014 version. And last but not least, Shadow Arrow. This one, the damage is this very similar again, starting at 2d6, scaling up to 2d12, which is very similar to the 2014 version, which is starting at 2d6, scaling to 4d6. So very, very close in damage, same psychic damage type. Now the big change was the rider. So the rider effect on the 2014 version was always strange. Your vision got reduced to 5 feet, which meant that if they just walked up to anybody into melee, this did nothing. But if they, against you, they couldn't see you, which meant, I guess, you'd have advantage. Anybody at range would have advantage to attack them because you could see them, but they couldn't see you. So it helped some of you, but not the whole party, right? Whereas the UA version just straight up gives you the blinded condition until the end of the next turn, which is so much better. Right? It's just blinded towards everybody. And that's a great change. I'm glad they did it. Makes this way more useful. And overall, big thumbs up. I think this was a huge improvement. I think the September UA far better than the June UA, and the June UA I think was better than the 2014 version. So they are making steady progress in the right direction. I still think there's some opportunity for improvement and simplification that I hope that they implement just to make this easier to use and less complex for players and DMs to remember how does that work and what are all these exceptions, which is already kind of a problem with D&D, even the 5th edition, especially once you get to higher levels. There's lots and lots of people forgetting, like, oh, I had this, and oh, I forgot about that feature, and I forgot that this thing worked that way, and you got to look it up and figure it out, and that really bogs down play as you get into higher levels. So I hope they streamline this, simplify it, but they're definitely on the right track. Even if they release this as is, I think this is an A tier subclass for fighters. Like, this is great. So love it.